All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi. I'm the Editorial Director of DeviceTalks, the events, but I'm also the former podcast host of the Medtech Talk podcast. I joined the DeviceTalks events a few months ago because I really wanted to organize meetings for more of Medtech. I'm going to tell you more about the DeviceTalks events going forward, but right now I want to focus on what you're listening to, which is a DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. We're going to be bringing you a DeviceTalks podcast, much like Medtech Talk. We'll be focusing on interviews with Medtech leaders, but I wanted to tap into the great resource that we have here at DeviceTalks. I work with great reporters at MassDevice and Medical Design and Outsourcing. We talk each week, we review the stories of the day, and I wanted to bring those conversations to you in this podcast. I'll be joined by Chris Newmarker. Chris is the executive editor of Life Sciences here. He oversees MassDevice and MDO. And Chris and I kind of have clicked from the start. We've only been working together for a few months, but really enjoy our conversations together. So it made sense to bring these talks to you. So each week we're going to focus on the news of the week. Right now, that news is centered around COVID-19, but this will change. Normalcy will return, and we'll be bringing you DeviceTalks Weekly each week, giving you a highlight of the MedTech news that you need to know. MassDevice does a great job. MDO does a great job, and we want to make sure you're aware of the stories they're breaking. So please tune in each week. You can listen to this on the ride home once you're working in an office again. But until then, take the dog for a walk, hop on the treadmill, plug this in, and get up to date on what's going on in MedTech. We'll also talk to leaders in the MedTech industry. Talking today with Raj Denhoy of Jefferies about how all of this has impacted MedTech stocks. Raj was kind enough to take a few minutes to talk to us. So I'm really happy about this project, about DeviceTalks Weekly. I'm really, really happy to be bringing you the DeviceTalks podcast. That'll be coming out next week. Again, we'll be talking to CEOs, VCs, and other leaders in the MedTech industry. So buckle up, folks. We're going to give you some great MedTech information going forward. Now, let's get into this conversation with my colleague and pal, Chris Newmarker, executive editor of Life Sciences. So, I'm not exactly a podcast historian, but I'm willing to bet that no podcast has ever been led off with the question, Chris, were you able to find toilet paper yesterday?
No, I wasn't. No toilet paper. It was amazing. I mean, things are really bad when you go to Costco and there's no toilet paper.
I told you, check out Staples. That might be the secret.
We have 12 rolls around the house. I think we'll be fine for a bit. Well, hopefully the toilet paper panic will end soon.
Well, we're not here to talk about toilet paper. We're here, obviously, to talk about MedTech. This is our first episode of DeviceTalks Weekly. This is pretty exciting. I haven't had a device podcast partner before, so this is fun.
Yeah, this is really fun. And too bad we're starting this off during some pretty crazy, terrible, interesting times. But yeah, I think I am looking forward to the kind of insights we're going to hopefully be able to provide to people.
So let's focus on that. We are starting this off in the age of COVID-19, and the whole world is impacted, including and maybe in particular the MedTech world. I'm wondering, from the coverage that you folks at MassDevice have been doing this week, what were some of the most read stories, which I guess we can extrapolate to be the most concerning issues regarding COVID-19?
Well, I mean, the thing that got the most attention from our audience this week was just like, actually just how, poorly medical device stocks are performing, along with the rest of the market. I mean, some people I talk to, would, have kind of this idea that, like the device industry overall is fairly recession proof. After all, people get sick, they need devices. And so, this pandemic's going to require like a ton of medical devices to fight it. So of course the device industry is going to, their stocks aren't going to be, doing as poorly as the overall markets, but they actually are.
Well, I'll talk with Raj Denhoy at Jefferies in a little bit about this subject, but it's clear that one of the more vulnerable parts of the medtech industry are those providers or those manufacturers who provide implants for elective surgery. I think in particular orthopedics.
Oh, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I heard from Raj, and we'll hear some more from him about that soon. I also spoke with Debbie Wang, a senior analyst over at Morningstar, and really, yeah, that is the big message that, I mean, the epidemiologists are saying that our hospitals are going to get really overcrowded this year as we fight this pandemic, and there's not going to be room for people who need knee surgeries or hip surgeries. Those are going to have to wait while we help all these people who are going to need ventilation, need help, with this virus. So, at least on the short term, companies that are making a lot of devices that are using elective surgeries, they're going to see like a really big sales hit. And I think that does really seem to be a big story about why the device industry isn't immune from the coronavirus stock market decline we're seeing.
Hey everyone, so this seems like a good time to take a break from my conversation with Chris and talk with Raj Denhoy. Raj is the Managing Director at Equity Research at Jefferies. He's an analyst, and Chris talked to him earlier this week for an article that appeared on MassDevice. You can find that on massdevice.com. Raj and I talked early on Friday morning. Well, Raj Denhoy, thanks for joining us.
No, thank you.
So Raj, how long have you been doing what you're doing on Wall Street?
So I've been following the medical device sector for about 20 years now. I've been at Jefferies, my current shop, for about 10 years, always on the equity research side, tracking the medical device industry and companies within it.
And how weird has this week been compared to all others?
It's been relatively unprecedented. The pace at which things have changed over the last, 2-3 weeks has been sort of staggering. If you really think back to just a month ago, this was just, something people were starting to get worried about, and now it's kind of become a full-blown crisis. And obviously the equity markets have rolled over, and people are still trying to, I think, assess where all this goes. But so it's been sort of unprecedented. But I guess, having done this for a while, going back to, 2008 and even, all the way back to September 11th, I mean, there's been periods of dislocation before. So
Sure.
Again, unprecedented, I suppose, in most of our recent memories, but certainly not in the stock market.
Well, the first question I have is just how did the Medtech sector fare overall?
Well, if one looks at, kind of picking a date and time, right? So maybe the 24th of February, when things really started to take hold, the IHI, which is the medical device ETF that we use to sort of track the industry, is down about 21% through yesterday. S&P down about 26%. The XBI, which is the biotech index, is down about 27%. So I think generally speaking, we've fared a little bit better than the broader markets and other sectors within healthcare. Healthcare overall, I think has fared a bit better than the broader markets, but I think we certainly haven't been immune by any stretch.
So what are companies saying about the impact that all of this is having on their sales and manufacturing? Any stories out there that can sort of best represent the problems that the medtech sector is dealing with at large?
Probably a couple thoughts there. I mean, I think getting back to that original comment about how this is sort of a rapidly evolving situation, when this first started to become an issue in China and then ultimately in Italy, we saw companies coming out and talking about the impact they were seeing on procedure volumes in those countries, those geographies. Some companies came out and talked about how elective procedure volumes in China, for instance, were down 85 to 90% in the month of February, and that had continued into early March. Some of the more recent updates have now started to talk a bit more about the impact in Europe and Italy in particular, starting to see some impact in elective volumes in those geographies. I think what is still a little bit unknown, though, is what's happening in the United States. And so as this becomes a bigger concern, not just in terms of the volumes of infected patients, but also in terms of the perception amongst even healthy people about what they should be doing in this period, people I think are starting to think about what that does to elective procedure volumes here. And to that end, we did a little survey just this week. Actually, on a Wednesday morning, we fielded this survey with 62 clinicians. We had orthopedic surgeons, interventional cardiologists, anesthesiologists, asking frontline doctors what they were seeing in terms of procedure volumes. And while most of them haven't seen any impact, about 23% of them, so a little less than a quarter, had already started to see some impact in their procedure volumes. It was still relatively minor, but it was starting to happen already. And I think also most of them, I think the number was 55%, thought it was going to increase. And most of them also said that their hospitals were already starting to prepare for moving resources to take care of COVID-19 as opposed to doing elective procedures. And so I guess it just fills into that same argument that this is sort of rapidly evolving, right? And the impact on procedure volumes is, I think, what people are most focused on over the next 6 months or so, even beyond that, depending on how long this takes.
I'd be willing to wager if you did that survey this morning on the 13th that the numbers would be different, given that all that's broken
Agreed.
over the last 48 hours.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing, right? So that was just literally we fielded it Wednesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So we put it out Tuesday evening, and we got all the responses by Wednesday midday. So to your point, in the span of 48 hours, it's changed quite a bit.
So finally, looking forward, what will you be watching for over the next few weeks to sort of see if things are turning up, I hope, or turning down? Are there some indicators, some bellwethers out there that we should be looking for?
So I suppose at a very high level, people are starting to, investors, us as well, we're looking at how exposed device companies ultimately are to any slowdown in the economy, right? And so what I'm referring to there is, are these companies levered? How well capitalized are they to ride through any storm, any protracted period of reduced volumes, and ultimately reduce revenues? And for the most part, medical device companies are in good shape, right? So most of these companies are not heavily levered. They don't have near-term maturities that are going to be draining their cash positions. And so for the most part, I think they're relatively safe at this point on that front. But then it becomes just this question about, what do earnings look like over the next couple of years? And I think one of the interesting observations as well is if one looks at the EPS estimates for the IHI, again, using that medical device ETF, we haven't seen any capitulation yet. So the earnings, the outlook for those companies has not started to come down. So analysts like myself have not started to go in and reassess how our earnings outlooks for these companies, and that is going to start to happen. And so I think what investors should start to prepare for is sort of a negative revision cycle in earnings and how to really address that. But I guess the offset to that though is these stocks have already come down quite a bit in terms of valuations, right? And so with the group down about 21%, the valuations have commensurately already collapsed somewhat. And so now it's just a question of how the numbers ultimately match that. And that's what we're going to be focused on. Having said all that, though, I think one of the areas we're suggesting people continue to look is the companies which are a bit more immune. So companies whose procedures are not elective or that can't be delayed indefinitely. I think those companies probably still represent some level of safety in this environment. So we're getting to the point where I think people are starting to look for those types of names on a relative basis.
Can you identify any specific companies that perhaps may be holding most steady?
So one name we've tried to get people to focus on is Edwards Life Sciences. EW is a ticker. So again, the maker of transcatheter heart valves. There is a modest elective nature to this, right? So people can push out getting aortic valve replacement, but you can't do it indefinitely. Once you get diagnosed with severe aortic stenosis, your prognosis is pretty grim, and so doing it sooner rather than later is definitely advised. And so there's a relative level of safety in that company, but if things get really bad out there, I suppose everything becomes somewhat elective. But that one we're sort of highlighting is one that perhaps doesn't have as much exposure as maybe a company like Zimmer or Stryker, which do a lot of orthopedic procedures, and these can be delayed, really indefinitely. So Edwards is one we're focusing on.
Well, thanks for your time, Raj, and best of luck with everything going forward. We hope to have you back on the podcast in the future.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
All right, now it's time to get back into my conversation with my pal, Chris Newmarker. But before I do, I want to let you know we have some DeviceTalks events on the books. We have 2 coming up in June. We've got June 1st and 2nd in Minneapolis. That's DeviceTalks, Minnesota. Then June 23rd and 24th, we have DeviceTalks West. That's in San Jose. Finally, our big one is DeviceTalks Boston. That'll be September 24th and 25th, of course, in Boston, my hometown. Our events in June are currently scheduled to go on. We have not made any changes, but we are, of course, monitoring the situation. So please do stay tuned. We obviously want to make sure we do right by our sponsors and our attendees and the Medtech community. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at MedTechTom. You can reach me via email, Salemi at WTWH Media.com. Now let's get back into my talk with Chris. And I think the issue that's impacting most of America, at least healthy America, and we joked about toilet paper at the start. Yeah, that's certainly a concern. But more drastically, more dangerously, we're seeing a shortage of supplies for hospitals. 3M in particular. I know you folks wrote about that this week. How is the supply chain looking for Medtech?
I mean, there really seems to be a lot of issues with with the demand right now outstripping the supply. I mean, if you just take 3M as an example, I mean, they make the N95, respirator masks that are supposed to be like some of the best masks you could wear in a healthcare setting to protect yourself from an airborne pathogen like COVID-19. And I mean, not only have the supplies been drained down because of the epic fight that China was waging against this virus, but at the same time, you have a ton of panic buying. People, regular people who don't. These masks probably aren't going to help them that much. At least that's at least what I see the experts and the media reports saying. They don't really need them, but they're panicking and they're buying them, and that means that that's just even less masks that are available for the hospitals, and that's bad because these the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare providers, they need these masks to feel safe while they're trying to save our lives. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are. And, 3M, they had in a news release, early this month, they were talking about a plant in Aberdeen, South Dakota that makes these masks. They're running around the clock. They're hiring workers around the world. They're adding shifts. They're ramping up the production lines. But, they're still, they're doing, they appear to be doing really everything they can. But, they're just not meeting the supply right now.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I wasn't aware that they were going to be adding shifts and adding workers, and that certainly is hopeful. I guess we'll see once the COVID-19 actually hits significantly how that impacts the workforce and the ability to produce these supplies going forward. But I don't know. Clearly, it seems as if we were, as an industry and as a nation, and I know this is beyond both your pay grade and my pay grade, but we've been running with such a very fine margin all these years, making sure there isn't much inventory available. I think things likely will change in the future. I think they have to.
I think in the future we definitely better be prepared more because we live in an interconnected world, and we're going to see more. And the nice thing is that people we have so much interaction between people in the world, and and this is bringing us closer together, and but at the same time as we're bringing ourselves closer together, we're sharing our diseases, and including ones that that can kill a lot of people.
That's an interesting point, and in a macabre way, speaking of bringing people together, the other area that we've seen impacted in medtech and everywhere really is just the public gathering and the conferences. I mean, this is something that hits DeviceTalks in particular. Obviously, our principal business is putting together events. We still do have our two events in June, the one in Minneapolis and the one in San Jose. They're still scheduled at the moment, but we're obviously keeping an eye on the situation. We've developed a policy that basically will protect any sponsor or attendee financially if they are signed up and they opt not to be part of it. We completely understand. I mean, we're all in this together, and we don't want to take any money we don't earn or keep any money we don't earn. So we're working toward that end right now, but we also need to look obviously at the global scale and see how that really will impact in June. At this point, it's really difficult to say, although as we've said, as the days go by, the situation looks more and more more and more dangerous. So we'll keep our sponsors and our attendees posted. But more broadly, I mean, how do you feel that this cancellation of all medtech events? We've seen the AAOS canceled. We've seen other events canceled. How is
HIMSS?
Yeah, HIMSS. What are you talking with folks about the impact of that on their businesses and I guess on them personally?
I mean, I've always had the sense, all of these events are are really important, to kind of further the innovation that we see in the medtech space. I mean, there's just nothing like having a bunch of people together, being able to meet face to face and network, to have, clinical studies rolled out. You've been to about as many of these events, and I think probably more events than I have. And this is kind of where, the clinical studies get rolled out, results get rolled out, where the new products get rolled out, where you get a sneak peek into what different companies are doing, and like potential business deals get done, get started at these types of events. And it's I it's going to be really interesting to see what happens going forward. I don't see. It's definitely going to have a real dent, I think, on the ability of people in the industry to network. Maybe they'll get more creative. Maybe we'll have more video conferencing and webcasts and whatever. But you still, it's just hard for me to see in the long run how you can really replace what you can get out of having face-to-face meetings. Human beings, we take so many visual cues when we communicate with people, and even over a video conference, some of those things get lost.
It's definitely real. I was talking with a CEO of a commercial stage privately held Medtech earlier this week, and they had a European meeting canceled where they were going to roll out their new product, and they're going to show it to physicians. And it's one of these disruptive technologies that I think you have to sort of see to quote unquote believe. And now they can't do that this year. And what does that do for their projection going forward? What does it do for their burn rate? What does it do for their hiring of a sales force? There's a very large trickle down effect to all of this. And to your other point, I was talking with a manufacturer yesterday who, number one, they manufacture in Europe, so they were shocked by the declaration that travel from Europe would be banned at least for 30 days. They initially worried it was going to be products. Didn't know how they would get their products into the U.S. When they learned it was just people. That was a bit of a relief. But as he said, you don't close deals over the phone. You don't close deals over a computer. You close deals in person. So if you can't see people and talk to them and show them and support them in their decision, then it's going to make doing business harder for everybody.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to line up some medtech plant overseas that you never visited. You want to visit the place. Who knows? Who knows what it is otherwise, right? Here's one thing. This thought that I've had about this too is that I think it's already been. It already was more difficult to start a medical device company outside one of the big hubs. The big hubs in the United States are Boston, Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Northern California, Southern California, especially Orange County in Southern California. So, if you weren't in one of those big hubs, it already was difficult because, you had all these, contract manufacturer networks, experts, the big companies you're hoping might invest in you or acquire you eventually. All those things were based around those hubs already. These big networking events that drew in people from across the country or all over the world were then, even more important because this is the way you could get in and network and, still get things done. And in some ways, maybe this is going to make it just even more important to be in one of the hubs, down the road because, at least, you will have, no matter what, you always will have networking events in those hubs, and there'll be, ways to go and meet people if you're based there, but it's in a way it could make it just even more harder to we'd like to see more innovation and even more clusters of innovation around the United States. It might make it even harder to do so. There might be even more of this pressure that you got a really neat idea, well, you're going to have to move to Minneapolis, or you're going to have to move to Boston, or go to Silicon Valley to get this done. Oh, and or Irvine. I'll throw in Irvine too. I shouldn't forget Irvine.
I'm sure some others will tell us of hubs that were hubs or future hubs that we're forgetting. But perhaps the flip side of that will be if during this experience we'll learn how to work remotely more effectively. Maybe we'll open the door for innovators outside of those hubs to collaborate and to get products done. I'm sure we're going to see some changes from some of our Device Talks partners, the product development companies and manufacturing companies, looking at ways to mitigate the inability to travel in the future, because I have to think that this isn't going to be the last time we have this experience. So it will be interesting to see what the long-term impact is.
Yeah, what was that old saying? Like necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, here we go.
Yes.
We got a lot of necessity. So, we could. We could get through all this, and people were like, "Hey, this wasn't so bad working at home." Hey, this, maybe I don't need to travel as much. That's bad news for the airlines and the hotels, but maybe we'll get more efficient, and we'll get a few extra loads of dishes done because we're working around the house. We'll need more toilet paper at home.
All right. Well, with that left in everyone's mind,
had to circle it around to the toilet paper.
Exactly. So this is our new DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Chris and I are going to be get together, and we'll bring other folks from the MassDevice editorial team who are doing really great stuff. You should check it out at MassDevice.com if you haven't already. And you can find information about our DeviceTalks events at DeviceTalks.com. But this is a new thing for Chris and for me. So we'd love to get feedback both on this podcast, but on any of the issues we're talking about as well. I can be reached directly at T Salemi, that's TSALEMI at WTWH Media.com. And I'm also on Twitter. I am at Medtech Tom. And Chris, why don't you share your information as well?
Hey, you can reach me at Newmarker, C just like a Newmarker, at WTWH Media.com, and I'm at Newmarker on Twitter. So yeah, I would love to hear your feedback.
Thanks to everyone for joining us on this first podcast, and we'll be back next week with another episode of DeviceTalks Weekly.